Hello and welcome to Hands-on GUI Programming by PAC Publishing. I'm Burkhard Meyer. I have 19 years of professional experience in the software industry and more than 5 years working exclusively with Python. I'm the author of several PAC Python videos. The first one is Learn Python Programming with Games. The other one is Python by Example. I created Python GUI programming recipes using PyQt5. I also created Python projects, and I'm the author of the Python GUI Programming Cookbook, both the first and second edition. In this course, we will be creating GUIs written in Python. This video overview will give you a glimpse of the entire course, and I will show you an example from each of the 4 sections. In section 1, we'll be creating GUIs written in Python. We'll start by using the tkinter built-in framework that ships with Python. So this is an example. We start simple as possible, and then we get more advanced. So we're importing tkinter SDK, and we have some other import statements. And it's still simple. So when we click this button here, we have added the functionality that the label down here gets updated. See message box. We invoke a message box, an informational message box, and it displays in itself the text we've entered. When we click OK, the label is still the same. Now I've added some extra functionality. When we click the second button, we get the text that's displayed in there. When we click OK, we're also clearing the label. And if we don't enter any text, if it's blank, in the first one it doesn't do anything. But in the second one, it brings up the message box, say, with no text because we didn't enter anything, and it still clears the label. We have written our own window title up here and gave it our own icon. Well, that's a Python icon, but updated the default icon, and that's all in the code. I'll show you that. And we have a menu with menu items, and when we click exit, it exits the application. In section 2, we will advance from what we have learned in section 1 by building more advanced GUIs written in Python with tkinter. Towards the end of section 2, this is an example of we start programming using classes, object-oriented programming. So we create our GUI from a class. The code is in a class, and it's not too complicated, but it's always good to know how to do that. So here's an example from section 2. We still have the buttons, same functionality. We can start a progress bar, we can stop it immediately, or we can stop it after a second. And we have a tab control here, so we have 3 tabs now on the second tab. When we open the second tab, it runs some Python code that reads a web page. Actually, it's a Python web page, the Python documentation. So that comes from urllib here, and I explain how that works. And on tab 3, we have a drop-down button, and we can select a number and a drop-down widget. And this is actually a button. So you can see this is a default tkinter icon. I didn't update it in this program. And this is our window title bar. And when we click the image here, which is a button, it updates the title bar and also the icon. So this is an example of section 2 using tkinter. In section 3, we will change over to using PyQt5 instead of tkinter to build our GUIs with Python. And PyQt5 does not ship with Python, so we'll first install it. And we will also install the very excellent visual Qt Designer tool that PyQt5 offers us, and we will visually design GUIs with it. So this is a PyQt Designer. It's a great tool. We can start with a form. We can simply drag controls from the left-hand side, widgets from the left-hand side onto the form. And once we've done that, for example, there's a text label, we can see properties. We can see which class it is, object name, and properties down here in the property editor. So this is being created within Qt Designer, and the extension is a .ui file. You can run it, preview it by itself, and that's all cool and good. And the next step is to convert the UI file to a Python code, and there's a PyQt5 utility to do that. So this is UI design file converted to Python file. The utility does that for us, and as you can see here, warning, all changes made to this file will be lost. So this is basically the code of the UI we just looked at. We can run it by itself as a Python file, and that's what we just looked at in the Qt Designer, what we created that in the Qt Designer. And now the important thing here is that we can write our own Python code and import this design.py file. And then we can add lots of functionality, and that's what we're going to do in this video. So we design the visual parts, the widgets in Qt Designer, then we convert the UI file to a py file, then we import this file, and then we add functionality that didn't exist before. So here, for example, we can exit the GUI now. In section 4, we will advance from what we have learned in section 3 by building more advanced GUIs written in Python with PyQt5, and we will continue to use the Qt Designer to visually create our GUIs and then convert it and import it into our Python code, which adds the functionality. So this is an example of section 4. This is in Qt Designer. As you can see, we have more tabs now, we have different widgets, and we can click on them, we can drag them from the left hand side onto the form. We can start adding functionality, and we're going to talk to networks via TCP/IP, and we also talk to a SQL database, and that's the Qt Designer part. So after we converted our UI design to Python code, we can import it as before, and in this case we add networking capabilities and some other things. So when we run it now, this is the imported UI. You can see, I can clear the label, give it text. We can convert UI to Py files from within the GUI. We can start a TCP server and connect to it and do lots of things, all with Python and Qt5. And we can create databases and add rows, delete rows, and view the data. So what do you need for this course? Well, you need a computer with an internet connection. I'm using Windows 10, but because it's Python, it should run on Linux and Mac as is without changing the code. You will need some experience with Python and programming in general, and also how to install Python packages using pip, and not so much installing, but troubleshooting in case it doesn't work on your machine. So we learned Python GUI programming with two frameworks, with tkinter and PyQt5. That'll give you a chance to compare the two and see which one you like better in case you want to write GUIs in Python. We'll overload widget functionality because that can be a problem, and I show how to have a workaround for that. We'll visually design GUIs with Qt Designer. We'll debug PyQt5 code with Python hooks. That's good to know. We'll create executables with PyInstaller, so we'll have to install PyInstaller first, and then I use it from within the GUI. As always, I use a modular approach to coding, so we'll keep the UI code as separate as possible from the functionality we write in separate Python modules. We will also be testing the GUI, and we will be connecting to networks and databases. So let's get started.